Good morning. Good morning, everybody. How we doing this morning? I see, hey, Steve. Hey, good morning, Rody. Steve in with First Blood this morning. That's excellent. So, man, I'll tell you the truth. I don't like to talk about mass shootings. Because at the end of the day, nobody cares that the shooting happened. Nobody seems to care what's going on with the victims. Everybody just wants to play the blame game. And, it's the evil gun. Oh, well, it aggravates the absolute crap out of me. So there was a shooting incident yesterday, apparently, at the Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl victory parade. Rhodey says this was gang violence. It doesn't fit the narrative. Yeah. We actually just had to cover just recently the Joel Osteen shooting. And this event yesterday is going to drop out of the news pretty quickly as well. So I'm going to go ahead and cue this up a little bit. Here's a tweet from Ed Krasenstein. Let me zoom in on that a little bit so y'all can read it as well. This is from right after the shooting at Joel Osteen's church. So here's Ed Krasenstein. Yesterday, a woman walked into Joel Osteen's Texas mega church with an AR-15 that had Free Palestine written on it. 2 individuals were wounded, including a young child, and the woman was killed. I believe the woman shot herself. Joel Osteen then came out and said, "We don't understand why these things happen, but we know God's in control." And I'd say to Joel, we do understand why these things happen, because we got rid of the asylums. We got rid of the sanatoriums, because our dangerous, crazy people are just wandering free. And that's a blanket statement. Look, I'll give it to you. That is a broad and blanket statement. And the question of how fairly and reasonably to apply a standard of care and a standard of safety for everyone without just locking up everybody who's a little crazy. Because there's plenty of crazy out there that's just fun. There's plenty of crazy out there that's not dangerous. And it's a very thin line to try and divide who the dangerous crazies are, like the Osteen shooter, and who the, just interesting eccentrics are. It's a difficult line to do. But he goes right in here, in my opinion, telling people gun control is a cop-out. People need to take responsibility for their society. And he goes, and this is where it gets me. Osteen is a fraud. You know what? Ed Krasenstein is the kind of guy that will say, I talked about victim blaming. I actually, in reference to this in context the other day, and I made the point, the classic example on victim blaming is following a rape case. If somebody says she shouldn't have been walking down that alley, she shouldn't have been dressed that way, she shouldn't have been drunk in the wrong part of town. Oh, you monster, you're just victim blaming. You're just trying to make excuses for the evil white male patriarchy. Okay, couple things. Statistically, probably not a white male. More likely, frankly, in this country, more likely it was somebody from the Middle East. It was a Muslim. but statistically, not likely to be a white male. If we're talking about a dangerous alley, no. But more importantly, the point to that conversation is not it's her fault and it's okay that it happened to her because she deserved it for being what she is. Right? Oh, well, she's just a slut. She deserved to get... No! That's not the point. The point to that conversation is a horrible thing happened. We do not want horrible things to happen. Let us examine what led to the horrible thing happening. And it may be that part of what got you there is the victim making a series of bad life choices. Your car breaks down on the side of the road. Your buddy, who's a mechanic, comes to help you out, and he explains, well, Chris, you've had the same water pump in the truck for 24 years. You should have replaced it a decade and a half ago, and then you wouldn't have overheated and broken down. I make that reference because I actually did just replace a 24-year-old water pump in my pickup truck. And, oh, by the way, I just decided to do it, basically. The truck didn't break down. But when my mechanic took the water pump out, it was like, he kind of waved his finger at me like, Chris. Like, yeah, I know, but, you know, I've replaced the motor, the transmission, all this other stuff already. I know, it should have been done. Now we're doing it. But my point is, when you look at something like a major criminal incident, a human tragedy, it is reasonable, in part at least, to examine it in the same way that you're going to think about, why did my car break down on the side of the road? Well, I neglected the maintenance. And so this part that should have been replaced as part of routine maintenance at 100,000 miles is sitting here still spinning at 300,000 miles, and it's just tired. It wasn't ready, right? Choosing not to go down that dark alley, not being shit-faced drunk on the wrong side of town, not dressing a certain way, not associating with certain people, not attending certain events. It's not about blaming the victim. It's about identifying the pattern that results in the negative outcome in order to avoid the negative outcome. You do a post-mortem on bad outcomes so that other people can learn from the bad outcome. It's reasonable. But Krasenstein just immediately jumps in, Austin is a fraud. We know why these things happen, and we also know that Austin will likely fundraise off of this tragedy in order to buy himself some fancy cars and houses. A tranny nut burglar went into his church and fucking shot people. This right here, this is, he deserved it because he's a fraud. I think he's a bad person, and so I think it's okay that it happened to him. Right? And of course, you know, I had to reply to that. Let me see. I know I had to have replied to that. Yeah, there it is. I said, you are amazing, Ed Krasenstein. We all know that obviously the order of defamatory blame goes like this. White guy equals evil right-wing white supremacist. Non-white male. The evil gun is to blame. Female or LGBTQ, etc., the victims got what they deserved. And that's exactly where he went with it. The victim got what he deserved. I'll give you this, at least you're consistently corrupt and vile, is where I took that. Well, now we got this shooting, and here you got this Laurie. I don't actually know who this person is, but I came across this one, and it just blew my mind to see this take. Okay, so you got some video. Oh, I was already on it. You got some video coverage of the people running away after the shooting started. And this Laurie chick says, my God, 6 years to the day of the Parkland school shooting. What the fuck does that have to do with anything? Shut up, bitch. Shut up. And now there's a shooting at the Super Bowl parade. This does not happen anywhere else. Okay. That's just false. That's just a completely false statement. Right? And, like, one of the big narratives by the gun grabbers on the left is that they want you to believe that there are more mass shootings in the United States than anywhere else in the world, which is false. Especially if you take the definitions of mass shooting. Like, in this case, apparently, and I don't mean to minimize this story, but it looks like there's one dead and a few injured after this shooting, right? And generally, for it to be classified as a mass shooting, they're looking for 4 dead, 4 or more. This is a couple of assholes with a gun, and I don't mean to minimize it, but definitions and statistics do matter if you're going to have these conversations, especially if one side is going to make this ludicrous claim. This does not happen anywhere else, in all caps, no matter how the guns were acquired or who got what or who got them. Common sense gun laws are needed. There are no common sense gun laws, you idiot. No matter how the guns were acquired or who got them. Really? Because it ain't complicated. If the guns were acquired illegally, then your common sense gun laws don't do shit. Nothing. Steve says they're claiming 47 in 45 days this year. But of course, they count every form of incident. It's 47 and 45 days. In order to get to that number, they have to count all of the gang violence where there's a drive-by, and all that kind of stuff. And what you will not see is those numbers counted when the crime statistics come out. Statistics don't lie, but liars love statistics. So let's just examine this for a moment. Here's an article from this is an old article. It's from 2019. And the only thing that has changed is because of the white genocide in South Africa, some of these numbers are even more scandalously supportive of the claim. America doesn't actually lead the world in mass shootings. Right, this is from the New York Post from 2018 or 2019. Anyway, the claim that the U.S. has by far the most mass public shootings in the world drives much of the gun control debate. Many argue that America's high rate of gun possession explains the high rate of mass shootings, and that's false. We've talked about the CDC statistics on the use of firearms. On the use of firearms by lawfully armed concealed carrying citizens to stop or prevent crime. And just as an aside, anecdotally, I have a dozen or so stories pulled up here. These are not just like Firearms Friday, bad guy broke into the house and grandma shot him with her little pearl-handled revolver. These are concealed carry permit holder, stops mass shooting, stops mass public shooter at mall in El Paso. A good guy with a gun stopped a mass shooting in Indianapolis. A plurality of Americans believe that armed citizens are the best way to protect. Mass public shooting at Indianapolis stopped by 22-year-old. Mass public shooting verdict, woman fatally shoots a man armed with an AR-15 type gun who began shooting at a crowd of people in Charleston. Did y'all hear these stories? Here's a dozen stories of incidents where what was about to happen is a bad guy was about to shoot a bunch of people at a mall, at a parade, at a sports event, at a large gathering, and an armed citizen said, "Not today, dickweed." and put him in the ground, put him where he belongs. Right? Now, if y'all go and look on Twitter today, I may be able to find some of this footage in a minute. I had it up a minute ago, but anyway, there's some footage. One of the shooters was tackled by locals, or by people in attendance at the event. But let's go back to the one thing we do know is that we have a pattern of mass shootings in this country that has no parallel anywhere else in the world, said President Barack Obama. To justify this claim and many other similar quotes, Obama's administration cited a then unpublished paper by criminologist Adam Lankford. Lankford's claim received coverage in hundreds of news stories all over the world. It still gets regular coverage, purporting to cover all mass public shootings around the world from 1966 to 2012. Lankford begins with a claim that includes the implied claim that he was able to examine mass shootings data from anywhere in Africa prior to the year 2000. That implied claim is a lie and excludes an enormous chunk of the world population from what is purported to be a report on the activities of said world population. Likewise, India, no criminal data out of there for the majority of the period which he is discussing. Lankford claimed that the United States had 31% of public mass shooters, despite having less than 5% of the population. So, according to Lankford's study, Lankford's claims, which I've just explained based on the available data on which he purports to have made those arguments, not only is the statement that this happens nowhere else categorically false, but in fact, even allowing Lankford's extremely suspicious estimate of 31%, America doesn't even have the majority. Maybe in this context, allowing a lot of generosity toward the interpretation of Lankford's data, you might be able to say that 31% against the volume in other countries represents a plurality. But the only way you get there is if countries actively engaged in war are not counted. And there's an important distinction there, because let me tell you something about a place that's at war. Right? A citizen who is not a veteran, who has not been on a battlefield, you have the wrong idea. You don't know what the fuck it is. I promise you. Now, your concept of what war looks like is probably a little more evolved than the redcoats and the colonials standing in straight lines with muskets and just taking turns shooting at each other. You've probably gotten a little bit past that, but let me tell you what really happens. What's really going on is essentially the law just doesn't exist. The police forces are owned by local power brokers, not by the government. They're on the personal payroll of individual wealthy people. They conduct active combat engagements against one another that are completely unrelated to the actual national level war activity. So you might have the Americans getting in gunfights with the Taliban, but just around the corner, there's an Al-Qaeda agent who's robbing a local national police station for their weapons, and it's not even related to the conduct of the war effort, because the closest he ever gets to the war itself is by contributing funding from his fucking poppy farm. So when you say that, so this data excludes the sort of mass shootings that happen in areas where there's other conflict going on. It's an incredibly tricky piece of cherry picking that is just deeply disingenuous. Right? So, Langford's claim received coverage. He purported to cover all mass public shootings around the world from 1966 to 2012, which is bullshit. Just, it's not possible. Langford claimed the United States had 31% of public mass shooters, despite having less than 5% of the population. But this isn't nearly correct. The whole episode should provide a cautionary tale of academic malpractice and how evidence is often cherry-picked and not questioned when it fits preconceived ideas. Langford's study reported that over the 47 years, there were 90 public mass shooters in the United States and 202 in the rest of the world. Langford hasn't released his list of shootings or even the number of cases by country or year. We and others, both in academia and the media, have asked Langford for his list, only to be declined. So Langford makes this claim that I've looked at all the mass shootings and a third of them happen in America. Wow, that's a shocking amount. I'd love to see your data. No. You just have to trust me. Oh. That'll be a no. Thank you. Right. He has also declined to provide lists of the news sources and languages he used to compile his list of cases. These omissions are important because Langford's entire conclusion would fall apart if he undercounted foreign cases due to lack of news coverage and due to language barriers. Excuse me. Langford cites a 2012 New York Police Department report which he claims is nearly comprehensive in its coverage of recent decades, which by itself decries your claim that you studied all mass public shootings across X period. He also says he supplemented the data and followed the same data collection method employed by the NYPD, which is just a shining tower of competence, let me tell you. But the NYPD report warns that its own researchers limited their internet searches to English language sites, creating a strong sampling bias against international incidents and thus undercount foreign mass shootings. Does Langford's paper also have that problem? Of course it does, because he wanted to get the nastiest outlook he could get to support Barack Obama's claims. We know of no way to discover most of the cases where 4 people have been shot to death in an incident in Africa or many other parts of the world during the 60s, 70s, 80s, or even 90s. And that is the reason that the new study just looked at the last 15 years from 98 to 2012 of the 47 years he examined. Langford's data grossly undercount foreign attacks. We found 1,423 attacks outside the United States. Looking at just a third of the timeline Langford studied, we still found 15 times as many mass shooters. Even when using coding choices that are most charitable to Langford, such as excluding any cases of insurgencies or battles over territory, his estimates of the U.S. share of shooters falls from 31% to 1.4% of global mass shooting incidents. It also accounts for 2.1% of murders and 2.8% of their attacks. All these are much less than the United States' 4.6% share of the population. You are safer in the United States than just about anywhere else in the world. It may be true that gun violence is less prevalent in some of the socialist utopias in Europe, where, oh, by the way, they have such a problem with people getting stabbed to death that their governments are having conversations about confiscating kitchen knives. There's footage now from the incident at the Chiefs Parade where some of the fans in attendance tackled the shooter, one of the shooters. There were multiple shooters. This incident is a little strange in that there were multiple shooters. which we usually see a lone gunman for these mass shooting events. I mean, it's not unprecedented that there's more than one. Another thing that's worth taking into consideration is this is not an attack on a school or a house of worship. This is an attack on a public gathering, a scheduled special event with security, right? We're talking about an event. Steve says, I think they tackled an unarmed guy who was with the shooters. I don't, that story is still developing, and I'm not sure on the details exactly, Steve. But we did have almost immediately a bunch of people making claims on the internets about. Damn, I got too many things open. I can't show you everything I wanted to show you because I'm a little over the top here. Let me see. No, I lost the last one I want to show you. So, what was I saying? What we do know is that when we see a gathering like this, in an event, it's a sporting event, it's a holiday parade, something like that. We see basically there's a religious motivation. We can generally expect it to be Islamic extremists. We've seen the pictures of the shooters. It's they got some black guys who were pulling the triggers, and of course, as soon as Steve says maybe I need a bigger monitor. I promise that's not the problem. Of course, as soon as the shooting happened, there was all this stuff about the Taylor Swift conspiracy theory, psyop stuff, and so of course, before all the shells had even hit the ground, you've got these leftist retards out there tweeting, "Oh, some MAGA nut job's shooting up the Kansas City Chiefs." Oh no, turns out it's not a white supremacist. But I think it was MSNBC that reported the shooters as dark white supremacists. That already happened. That has already happened. It's amazing, isn't it? Your government seeks to disarm you. And to fill the gap in your personal security, they offer armed thugs and a weaponized DOJ that hates you and is so incompetent to respond to emergency situations that the court itself has ruled in multiple cases. Right, you got the Winnebago case, you got the Castle Rock Gonzalez case, you've got multiple cases that the court has ruled that the police do not have a duty to intercede on your behalf. They have no duty to defend you. Right? Every time you see the logo that says protect and serve, you are reading a lie. And that's not my opinion of the police. That is the Supreme Court detailing this is the legal duty of the police. You cannot sue the police for a wrongful death case unless you are the arrestee who died in custody. And then your family that's trying to make the wrongful death case has to make the case that it was due to their neglect or that they caused the harm directly. But if the police watch you get raped and murdered in the street, their only legal obligation is to arrest the criminal after he has completed the crime. Right? The Supreme Court was very clear on this. They do not have to intercede and stop the crime from happening. They're not required to do that. You have no legal expectation that a police officer will see you being victimized and stop you from being victimized. Their only legal obligation is to investigate the crime after it has occurred and remand the suspect into custody for referral, indictment, and prosecution. And these 6 sons of bitches want to disarm you. Why did a couple of good guys tackle the shooter at the Chiefs event? Well, presumably because they weren't good guys with guns. Result, the shooter's still alive. It could have been a better day. Thanks for watching today, guys. I've got a great story that I wanted to talk about today, but I am intentionally putting off until tomorrow because tomorrow's Firearms Friday, and I think it will just be chef's kiss. Brilliant to cover in the morning. So y'all be safe out there. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow.